This is Defacto Review, where we run down the past news of last week and debate the possible implications. Hi, I'm Terrence Edwards, and with us tonight is our host, Jargo Defacto.
Good evening. We will make now this weekly review based on several important events for this week, for the last week.
Okay, let's look at the topics we have to talk about tonight. Election board set to decide on 28 seats in parliament. Mongolian politicians named in Panama Papers. Anti-corruption investigators appeal to Prime Minister. Unemployment still rising. Mongolia to hand over $70 million to settle long-running mining dispute. Once again tonight, we lead with the elections. The Parliament has approved a motion to create an election board that will have the final decision on the 28 seats in Parliament now up for grabs. Parties have each proposed their own strategies on how to allocate these 28 seats, which in 2012 were actually awarded by party list. However, the rules have changed, and now we're only seeing a direct election of specific candidates. Some, however, argue that the Democratic Party, with this creation, has had an overpronounced representation on the election board. Okay, Jargle. Do you think the motive behind this is fears about the independence of the General Election Committee? And do you think politicians making direct appointments can actually have any effect on independence over this decision?
As you said, this 28 seats, which was a part of proportional voting system, now divided into two parts.
Yes.
14 goes to a rural area, 14 goes to Ulaanbaatar. Now they have had a long fight because they were not clear how to divide, but finally they have divided. Then what happened? They have changed now the constituency size of each Ayamak in Ulaanbaatar districts. Some districts now have not 2 or 3, or some districts have a less, or some Ayamaks 2. So now issue is, based on what? This sort of decisions, this is kind of the cornerstone of our democracy. Who is represented, how many of us presented through which person to the decision-making process or legislative process. Instead of being based on the sort of research, scientific criteria, just a few 76 people have decided, even without consent of the second largest political party. They went on that, they have divided. So now question
and so close to the election.
Yes, and that's the whole this point is they can change the rule of game just within 50 days or so. It says the quality of public governance, public institutions in Mongolia are very poor. And now they are adapting the constituency size to the interest of each individual parliamentarian. And secondly, I think it shows also the quality of the institutions, as I said. Remember this week also we had the visit of James Robertson, who wrote a book, Why Nations Fail. And he made several lectures in the town. And the idea is some political and economic institutions, when they are extractive or it works for only a few people, not inclusive, meaning that works for everybody, that creates the reasons why the nations fail.
Yeah.
So I think from that perspective, I think it's a very irony, that he was here and they had changed it in that way. And it shows also how our political institutions are extractive.
Deep problems there.
Yeah, the other things I just want to comment on that is the process of legislation change.
Yeah.
Has we are afraid of that capacity of these 76 only people changing even the laws, most basic laws in that way. So maybe it's a matter of changing or restructure of Mongolian legislative body. Maybe it is a matter of having two chambers.
Okay.
Well, because our president, who has veto right to political the decisions or laws, looks very weak, and he cannot stop many laws changes that people find themselves irrelevant, but the parliamentarians go, like this case, with whatever they want. So maybe better of having a two-chamber of commerce, two-chamber of parliament, where one is as this one, and the other one maybe Senate, kind of.
Like a lower house, higher house.
Yes, so that it is very not easy to change our laws.
I imagine that would need some kind of constitutional amendment.
Very much so. There are several other concerns, like we call it double del,
Yes.
the cabinet member, parliament member being a cabinet member. If we have 400 parliament members like Canada or Britain, it's okay. But out of 76, 20 coming ministers, that's a problem. That's the conflict of interest. This is the base of corruption in the country, I think.
And for our viewers at home, the double del refers to the traditional robes Mongolian wears. It's a play on the double hats or multiple hats referred to in American colloquialism. Jargal, real quick, do you see any way the distribution of seats could be manipulated to favor any one party?
Well, basically, that's what the people find.
Yeah.
For example, one Aymak, Arhanga Aymak has now just the center of Arhanga Aymak has only one constituency now.
Okay.
And where the reason the people think they say that because the deputy from that Aymak, who is also has nickname Fortuna, he used this bond money to completely redevelop the road system in the Aymak.
Okay.
Out of 22 IMAX, only 2 IMAX made this success story. But unfortunately, only these 2 IMAX where former prime minister was from and this minister for that time economic development was from. So, as you said, the distribution of money even depends on how strong you are as deputy on your constituency.
Sure. Mongolian politicians have been linked to worldwide outrage over secret cash and tax dodging. A number of prominent Mongolian citizens, including elected officials, have been named in a list of 214,000 offshore accounts or entities created in 21 districts from Nevada to Hong Kong all the way to the British Virgin Islands. A database has been created that has 140 politicians from around the world, including Mongolia's former Prime Minister, Sukbatur Batbolt, the former Construction and Urban Development Minister, D. Zoktbatur, former MP, D. Batbayer, as well as current Mayor of Ulaanbaatar, Erdem Batol, and his son, Cholodai. Okay, so I think to some of our audience, this is an unfamiliar topic, offshore accounts. Why has this group, the Independent Consortium of Investigative Journalists, decided to release these names in a database? What is this teaching us?
Let's talk about first what is that offshore.
Sure.
First of all, this is offshore, which is not in your country.
Yeah,
beyond the border. And we should say that for the last 60 years, some 60 countries or territories have been doing these practices, and for some also initially right reasons, because it is easier to register companies in this offshore, and also it is so easier to register companies.
Yes.
And that's why so easier that that in countries like Mongolia, where it was more more difficult to register as joint venture as a foreign company, it was much faster for them to register in this offshore. So today in Mongolia we have several companies, 611 foreign direct investment companies to Mongolia, which are registered in 12 offshore countries and territories. Offshore is so much money, that, for example, Switzerland has $2 trillion worth capital assets, and British Islands have altogether $1.9 billion, etc., etc. Caribbean and Panama altogether $900 billion asset, etc. And according to a particular institute who made this research, the Guardian newspaper had announced that size. So that's what is offshore. But my take is also, along with this making easier, having a less tax, etc., therefore also there are politicians who were misusing this account for their own purposes. For example, this Iceland Prime Minister had not announced $3.6 million his account, deposit account there, and he had to resign very shortly after the announcements came out. And also France, England, Australia, and New Zealand governments have asked, have ordered their related agencies to investigate the details of the people related to announced in that Panama paper, for example. You know, my take here is we should only, Mongolia is getting a declaration of income of politicians, high-ranking officials. But it's a time to have now expenses report too.
Transparency.
So that in both sides, income and revenues are reported properly. All these things are doing because we should do it because we need more transparency. We need a better governance. So that's why I think it's in line of that direction, and using these Panama reports, we should have at least a written explanation by all politicians what exactly had happened by this time.
An explanation, because it doesn't necessarily mean that you did anything wrong or nefarious by having these offshore accounts.
Yeah, the whole world is also not happy with that. Also because these offshore accounts have been used by criminals, human trafficking, or gangs. These people were using it, so the reputation did not help the reputation of this offshore.
Yeah.
So at the end, offshore is not something that we can stop it today.
Okay.
It's almost impossible. You cannot stop the legislative, legal work of 60 countries and territories one day. It's impossible, even all countries together. So it will take a long time. In meanwhile, the events I suggested, the steps I suggested to be taken, at least in Mongolia.
Moving on, investigators have asked help from the Prime Minister to help them arrest corrupt officials. The lead investigators from the Independent Agency Against Corruption met with the Prime Minister to discuss how to have more centralized control over investigations into public figures. The Anti-Corruption Agency on Thursday asked the Prime Minister to back a bill that would give greater control to the state prosecutor. Viewers might remember that the Independent Agency Against Corruption was responsible for the case against former Prime Minister and President Namber Ankpire, who was found guilty of corruption in 2012, as well as current allegations against Haltma Batolga, the former Minister of Industry and Agriculture, over tens of millions of dollars that went missing from an account meant to finance the construction of railway to China.
You know, actually, this not only the Anti-Corruption Agency, but also General Intelligence Agency.
Okay.
The police department had all these three hands have met the Prime Minister and explained the situation. They have difficulties in the terms of investigation of criminals.
Sure.
New draft, I understand, was giving a right to prosecutor to have a general control over every investigation they are doing. They are made by these three agencies.
Sure.
Which they found that it is another way of kind of hindering the process, like the process against the well-known politicians. You just have mentioned the cases. But now the people concerned is there are arrests before you prove that he is a criminal. They're just arrested with some permission of, they say, the prosecutor, that then they put the guy into prison and they investigating.
Yeah.
which many people oppose. You know, you cannot arrest somebody unless you prove it he is guilty. With that process in Mongolia, big discussions are happening.
Okay.
So it's a matter of all these three agencies having properly doing their jobs, but in any case they should not limit or violate personal human right.
Sure.
So that's the concern. But there is a small clause about that well-known parliamentarian. In Mongolia, the parliamentarians have a special status. They are protected by law from any kind of arrest, investigation, until he is caught in the place or in the spot of criminal activity.
So he has to be caught in the act?
Yes, only
Okay.
in the act. Otherwise, you cannot go after.
Would that include videotape or recordings?
Everything.
Okay.
So it says that the security agencies are worried about that because they cannot do anything. They'll find at least they have a document so they can show, they can arrest somebody, but you cannot arrest it unless this person, this security, this right is not taken.
Big challenges, yeah.
It is, yes.
There are signs of economic relief along the horizon, but for today, unemployment is still a big problem plaguing society. Unemployment was up 4.5% according to government statistics. That's 143,500 jobs lost. So Jargal, this is new information, but we want to look at about 4 years of history. What's the trend of jobs under the Democrats over the last 4 years?
See, the statistics says that there are 143,000 people who are actively looking for jobs.
Yes.
And many of them maybe have lost, maybe they had never before, but it don't include those who, semi-busy. Either they
Part-time
will find-
laborers?
Yeah, 1 hour,
Seasonal?
maybe loading, whatever.
Yeah.
This kind of people are never go for these offices to look for jobs. I think the actual statistics, actual figure of unemployment is even higher.
Okay.
More than, I think, 11%, which statistics say today.
So people currently out of work because they're off from the season or part-time?
Those are not included into that.
Oh, they're not included.
Not
Okay.
included. So this is a huge number. In particular, in Mongolia, we have 3 million people, and 61% of them are actively involved. We call it actively involved, active population.
Sure.
There's about 1.8 million people, and out of them, about 11% is officially looking for jobs.
Okay.
And probably a lot, maybe twice more people have no jobs. So altogether, unemployment is a big issue, not only in Ulaanbaatar, but in each Aymak. I was last week in Bayungulgi Aymak, the western, our Kazakh province. There is 22%, was at least by statistics of last year. So the question is now, how can we handle this issue of unemployment? Why it is even increasing? Of course, we understand it's an economic issue, it is a recession issue, etc., etc. But overall, I think this one of the 4 strong macroeconomic metrics is also because we have too large government, and we have a lot of taxes, too much taxes, too high taxes, because this country that we have only 25 years ago. From 25 years ago, we have only a private sector.
Okay.
And for this private sector to pay this high social care taxes, income tax, though it's 10%, but still it's high.
Yeah.
So people are not interested to hire people.
Heavy burden.
Yes, and if you don't hire, you cannot extend your businesses,
Yeah.
People keep staying in that way. And also, because government is too big, government is spending too much, and in particular nowadays, when they have a lot budget deficit,
Yeah.
and part of this budget substantial part of budget revenue goes for paying the interest rates of foreign and domestic debts of Mongolian government. So with this current deficit, you have no chance to extend any opportunities for jobs in the country. And the other thing, I think the reason of unemployment is price control by the government.
Mm.
They have a special program called Price Stabilization Program.
I recall it, yeah.
And also they have discounted mortgage rate program.
8%.
8%. When the market capital rate is about 16%, they have
On
twice
the way
less.
to 5% too.
Yes, now they are going to 5% to do. So altogether, this requires more additional resources, which makes the government more in debt.
Okay.
So we have a very limited opportunity to have jobs for these unemployed people. Another concern is why the companies create jobs. They want to be competitive. They want to have higher productivity. This competitiveness is coming from competition of any sector. And that is not happening because price is controlled. Government is too much inside of the businesses. And they, for example, they provide special discounted loan to a particular sector, particular companies. Since you cannot provide everybody all this discounted loan, you make this playing level different.
Sure.
Those who has it, a different player now. So this sort of concern, economic issues, activity of the government, the dynamics of private sector, we have to discuss in this country. Unfortunately, we're more busy now with election and nobody is discussing about that.
Yeah, but I'm sure voters will think about that when they hit the polls. Mongolia is putting yet another mining dispute behind it. The country is set to pay $70 million to Canada's Han Resources to settle a 7-year dispute over the Dornod uranium project, according to a government source. The Mongolian government and Han Resources came to a new settlement of $70 million compared with the original about $100 million plus interest awarded by an international tribunal in Paris. The dispute goes all the way back to 2009 when the government of Mongolia revoked the license from Han Resources and instead handed it over to its Russian partner, ARMZ. Okay, so hot on the heels of Oil Tulga, that project for the underground mine is going forward. So we have another settlement. What is this signaling to international investors out there?
Well, on good news is our team keeps moving. Hopefully it will go ahead as scheduled. That's our hope. And then they will hire more Mongolians. Altogether they should. At good times it was about 8,000 to 10,000 employees.
Okay.
90% of them, 95% of them are Mongolians. So hopefully, maybe not to that extent tomorrow, but by schedule it will go, and they will have more employed Mongolians coming there, Mongolians coming to work for them. Back to this issue of Han Resources.
Yeah.
As you said, in Paris, the arbitration said that we to pay $130 million.
103, and then it rose with interest.
Yeah, then the Mongolian government has been discussing, meeting several times. At the end, agreed with Han Resources. We paid $70,000, $70 million.
Big gap there.
Tomorrow.
Yeah.
In fact, tomorrow. Tomorrow is the day.
According to a Thomson Reuters article that I reported, actually.
And good news is the government has collected the money and ready to pay. Tomorrow, I think it will be paid to save our name to what we have agreed. We have committed to this event, to this payment. But the issue is that $70 million is 140 billion tugriks. And today's state budget is 4 times of that, large.
Yeah.
So now we eventually and surely going to a very big debt. And of course the 70 million doesn't help. Plus, I'm always raising the issue for myself and asking people also why, who made these decisions? How come that a foreign company, Canadian company in this case, we gave them officially our license to explore, to produce that mine, uranium mine, then suddenly they have decided to take it from that person, that company, and give to Russians.
Yeah.
So who made it, and what is the responsibility of these people, which eventually caused us paying $70 million one day, which is tomorrow.
Yeah.
So it's a question of accountability, question of how government should be responsible for continuity of this responsibility. Okay, 2009 to 2017 and 16, we pay for 7 years back event today.
Yeah.
So who has this responsibility? That time, Prime Minister Bayer was the leader of the government.
Yeah.
So we need to ask them. I think media should ask them what exactly happened and why we have to pay like this.
And the buyer belongs to the Mongolian People's Party,
People's
correct?
Party, yes.
Yeah. But we're paying the money today. So do you think paying this money is an election killer for the Democrats? Do you think vote is going to be fodder for the opposition candidates coming up?
Oh, in terms of impact of this payment,
Yeah.
it is made at the time when the opposition or People's Party were in power.
Yeah.
And that decision is now being paid by the Democratic Party.
Yeah.
So in terms of to which favor, for whose favor it will be going on, it's hard to just now to tell, but we know that it is very strong impact. It's a huge size of money, chunk of money paid in one day. And plus, there are several payments are expected from us
Yeah.
in the row from
Down the road.
down the road for the Trade and Development Bank loans,
Yep.
and later on the Genghis Khan bond of the government, etc.
Well, that's our program for today. We hope our briefings give you guys a heads up in the week coming. Jargal, how do you feel about this?
Let's do it. We are looking for your comment. Of course, there are things maybe differently you want us to more focus on, but nevertheless, this is the information we have just shared in Mongolian language 30 minutes ago at 8 o'clock. And hopefully you guys are watching and giving your comments to us. Thank you very much for watching us. Thank you.
Good night, Ulaanbaatar.